What's it like to write a book? What's the process and what does it take for you to get to the point where you're ready to write a book? Well, hi everybody. I'm Ricky Heller from rickyheller.com. I'm a writer, editor, and book coach, and I help you tap into the writer inside of you so that you can find your authentic voice and finally share your book with the world. And today I want to talk about how I was able to write and publish 4 books so far and what the process is all about. So today's part one, I'm going to talk about my very first book. For those of you who know me, you know that I used to be a college English professor. And so this was my very first published book, published with Thomson Nelson, which is the largest educational publisher in Canada. And this was published way back in 2002, and it is still in print. So, how did that happen? Well, it was a long process, and I really learned a lot by going through this process of working with a publisher and getting the book published. But even before that, I had to get to a place where I was ready to write this book because I had already written 3 books before this, of course, not published, never did anything with them. And I had an idea for another book with a colleague. And we even got to the point where the educational publisher my colleague had approached, they came to us, they were actually interested in the concept. We talked about it. And yet I felt I wasn't able to do that. I just wasn't at a stage where I felt ready to write a book. I felt like I didn't have the knowledge, I didn't have the experience. And so I kind of blew it off, quite frankly. And I kind of regret that I did that, but at least I got to the point where later I wrote this book, and the fact that this book did really well and was well received, I was really glad. So, how did it happen? Well, the publisher actually approached me because when you're teaching college, I taught English, you have book publishing reps who come to visit you all the time because they're there to try to sell you the books that you are going to be using for your classroom. So, I had many encounters with the rep around books for college English courses, and I was teaching a basic essay writing course. And so what happened was she had been speaking to me for a couple of years by then. She knew what I taught. She knew the books that I was ordering. And she said, have you ever thought about writing a textbook? And I said, yeah, but I just don't think I'm experienced enough. I don't think I'm there yet. And she convinced me by reminding me that what the book would contain was basically exactly what I was teaching in the classroom. So by that point, I had been teaching about 10 years. I had it down pat. I knew exactly the process from beginning to end of semester, how I was going to take the students from knowing nothing about writing an essay to writing really good essays. And so when she put it that way, she said, you just have to put that down on paper. That's what your book is. It turned out to be a little bit different because my book was half that process, which I, of course, composed and wrote myself. But the other half was sample writing from authors around the world. And so it was my job to choose those authors, get in touch with them, interview them, and find out if we could use their works. And that was actually a lot of fun, to be honest. But the way I was able to get my head around it was, well, I know this stuff inside and out. I know it works. Okay, I'm just going to put it on paper. So that was the first stage, was getting to a mental place where I was able to write the book. And then throughout the process, I learned all about what happens when you write a book with a publisher. I learned about developmental editing, which is what I do now, which is helping the author to develop the concept for the book in a way that makes the most sense for the readers. So a developmental editor will go through your outline, or if you don't have an outline, they may help you to construct an outline. They're going to help you to determine the order of events that go in the book, the order of points, whether it's nonfiction or fiction. And also, are you missing anything? Are there any gaps? Are there any overflows or things that don't belong in the book? Is there superfluity where maybe you've said something 3 times in 3 different places and you don't need to do that? So the developmental editor will help you with that. They'll help you to find your voice. When you think about voice, that's what you sound like to people when you talk to them. And certain people have very distinctive voices. You always know it's that person talking. Well, in writing, it's the same thing, right? So I have a specific voice. My writing comes across sort of the same way. And the voice should be consistent throughout your book. So they'll help with that. They'll help with structure from beginning to end, all kinds of things the developmental editor would do. So when I wrote my first draft, it was submitted to the developmental editor and then returned to me with a bunch of notes around suggestions for changes and so on. So that really helped me get clear on the structure. Then I wrote the whole thing, and they have a copy editor look at it next who will look for grammatical, spelling, those kinds of errors. And then the final step is a proofreader, the person who looks for typos and mechanical errors. So it's not a mistake in choosing the wrong verb, for instance, but it might be in typing, you wrote the word twice in a row, and we delete one of them. So all of those different people I had to meet. And I also got a good sense of the timeline with the publisher. It takes a long time from beginning to end when you work with a publisher to publish a book. Between the time we started and when we finished, it was about 2 years. So that was a really good experience for me to be able to work with these different professionals. And then we talked about the book cover, the book design. So this cover was designed by the publisher, and they sent it to me for my approval. My sense now is, even if I had not approved it, if they really liked it, they would have gone with it anyway. But luckily, I really did like the cover. And then the formatting, what's the size of the book, all of those things before it finally goes to print and it's turned into a paper book. So for me, that was a great experience. I was lucky that it was a very positive experience overall. There was a little glitch with the copy editing, but apart from that, very positive. And the fact that I was able to then go back to the classroom and use my own book in my classroom. That was a really sort of surreal, bizarre feeling where, you're prescribing your own book to your students to use in your class the way you teach the class. But it sure did make teaching the class easier because I knew exactly what was going to be in the textbook before we started. So that's how I did my first book, and that was quite a while ago. That really set the stage for my second book, which I will talk to you about next time in this 4-part series. But I hope that was helpful. I hope you learned something about the publishing process. For me, the lesson in this first book was, before you can write that book, you've got to get things in order up here. You have to believe you can do it. You have to feel confident in the material. And that's where a book coach can really help. If I had had somebody to talk me through it beforehand, I probably would have published a book 10 years earlier because I had the material. The book wouldn't have been very different from this one. Or it would have been a completely different book that I would have been able to publish that is now still sitting in a draft in a box in my basement somewhere. So the first step is always internal. It's always your mindset. And from there, who knows where you can go. All right, everybody, I hope that was helpful. If you'd like more tips like this, I do hope you'll subscribe to my weekly newsletter at rickyheller.com/subscribe. I also run a free weekly writing group for people who want to pop in and have some focused time to write. It's called Write with Ricky. I'm going to put the link below as well so that you can join. It's absolutely free. The only requirement is that you come and you write. And if you would like the optional opportunity after we write, I'm going to give you some free editing or review your work, absolutely complimentary. I set aside time for that. This is a huge opportunity because I normally do charge $1,000 for 3 hours with me in a private session. So if you want to get some feedback on your writing, if you have some writing you're working on and you'd like me to step my eyes on it and give you what I think about it, then please do join us for Write with Ricky 2. It's every Tuesday morning, 8:30 a.m. Eastern. And it happens every week. You can get on the reminder list below, and that way you'll have a reminder every week if you'd like to join, and also the link to join us there. All right, everybody. Hope that helps. Have a great week, and I will see you next time.